very good morning to you. We're live here in London and you're with Monocle on Sunday. I'm Emma Nelson and my guests will be sharing their views on the week's biggest stories. I've got Isabel, Hilton and Simon Brooke standing by. Simon, good morning. What have you spotted?
Good morning. Yeah, so we're talking about Trump and tariffs a lot recently, haven't we? But who could beat Trump in the next presidential election? Well, Katie Balls, the Sunday Times Washington correspondent, assesses the chances of Gavin Newsom, the Democrat California governor.
Thank you very much indeed for that. We'll be heading to Vienna.
I'm Alexei Korolyov, Monocle's Vienna correspondent, and I'll be bringing you the latest from the old Habsburg domain, including an insight into the minds of those who think the empire should make a comeback.
Plus, our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, is in Abu Dhabi. We'll be checking in with him in just a moment. It's the 22nd of February, 2026. Live from London, this is Monocle on Sunday.
Live from London, this is Monocle on Sunday with Emma Nelson.
And a very warm welcome to Studio One. It's 9:01 here in London. It's not freezing. It's not raining. We don't know what to do with ourselves. Simon Brooke, Isabel, Hilton. It's never good to talk about the weather on the radio because it's only specific if you're actually in the location itself. But it is one of those periods of time, isn't it, where just a bit of sky would be so nice.
Yes, well, when the sun comes out, even if it's cold, it does have a big plus for the mood.
Yes,
actually.
it does. But you're the kind of person who throws herself into cold water.
This is true. This is true. You have to learn to love the cold.
What have you done Where have you thrown yourself into cold water?
I have. Yesterday morning, 8 o'clock, up at Manor House. There's a large reservoir where we share it with the ducks and the swans. It's all heavily supervised. People in canoes in case you have a heart attack. But it's it's just very stimulating. It's a sort of legal high, really, is what it is. So everyone's very cheerful and friendly.
Any highs, legal or otherwise, Simon Brooke?
Well, my high actually is having a cold shower every morning, but I'm really impressed with you, Isabel, I have to say, because it's so much better if just instead of standing under your own shower, you're out doing it properly with other people and getting the full swimming experience. And I love being with the ducks. What a lovely idea.
It's the same spirit, though. Just
that's true. Yeah,
facing the cold.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And feeling so much better afterwards. Yeah.
Let's head to Abu Dhabi, where I don't think there are many reservoirs with ducks on them, but we certainly have our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé. A very good morning to you. Actually, Tyler, good afternoon.
Good morning, Emma. Yes, good afternoon from Abu Dhabi.
How are we doing? Oh, have we had any cold dips? There are two people in here who love a dip in cold water, and I suspect that you're in the absolute opposite place on earth for that.
Well, it's actually quite a lovely time of year. It's not quite cold dip season yet. It's sort of mid-20s, so there's not that desire necessarily to go and have a cold plunge. But I was sort of thinking, I'm in the Al Bateen district, this wonderful 60s, sort of 70s district, really sort of diplomatic quarter of Abu Dhabi. I have been doing a spin around looking at some villas thinking, but yes, if I had to be here probably sort of from May onwards, I would want a very cold plunge pool.
Talk us through the design ethic of where you are. What does it look like?
Well, listen, it's probably that part of the Gulf that you have seen snapshots of it, from Baghdad all the way down to Oman. This is the world of, beautiful arches. When you think of the Gulf, reflective windows on, white 70s and 80s villas, very mature palm trees, beautiful boulevards, takes you along to the Corniche. And it's this really wonderful district. I've just stumbled upon the Al Bateen supermarket and department store. And this, I have to send you a photo later. All arches, I would imagine, probably built in the late 1970s, abandoned. And I think this could be our move into the department store business. I was spinning around and it is completely empty. There's an empty Baskin-Robbins on the corner, which is probably a good thing. But yeah, there's a few cats around. There's a mosque next door. And I thought this place is, well, first ripe for preservation. And second, why not develop it?
Indeed. I mean, a quick look at looking up Al Bateen dynamically. I think it's called dynamic research, Tyler. The private villas in where you are at the moment just look absolutely phenomenal. I mean, there's no shortage of sort of the kind of architecture that you wouldn't want to spend a lot of time next to, but there's quite a lot of stuff that's very beautiful. Did you go in the supermarket, though? Because that is obviously the most exciting thing that anyone can ever do when they travel.
Well, here's the problem. The Albertine Market, it is closed. I mean, it's not just closed because of, Ramadan hours or anything. It is properly abandoned, sadly. But who knows? Maybe this is an opportunity. I'm going to make my way to Spinneys. I will go to Lulu markets. I do want to have a proper look around. I always, of course, like all of us, know better social study than to spend a bit of time in regional grocery stores and community malls. I'm also a big fan of the community mall as well, to see not just where all the luxury brands are, but what happens, whether you're Emirati, whether you are an expat, what does life look like on a Sunday? So
when we go shopping, right? Okay. Well, let's talk to us a little bit about your column this week. I am the mother of a 14-year-old who's just about to start working in a cafe because I believe he needs to get to work. Am I doing the right thing? I'm going for parental guidance from our editorial director for the first time.
Well, I'm not sure what the various legalities are of putting a 14-year-old out to work in the UK, but we can come back to the finances of the Nelson household another time. However, I am all for it. I believe this is absolutely what should be done. I was working at a WH Smith when I was 14 years old. I was paid in magazines and books, and this was in Winnipeg, in the middle of Canada. And I have to say, I think I've been working ever since. And I firmly believe that it's not just about a summer job, but what I'm talking about in the column today was just reflections over this time of year. I'm of lots of, friends whose children or kids are, of course, they're graduating. They're just finishing high school, or they're maybe finishing their bachelor's degree. Where do they go? What do they do next? And it's a challenged job market. If you have a sort of rather bland BA, even if you've got great results, it's tricky out there, of course, trying to find the dream job. So what I'm advocating is maybe go and do a 2-year contract with an airline, get out there, see the world, meet people, learn how to interact, be with people, rather than just saying, I'm going to take a gap year and just travel the world, but maybe not have a job.
Absolutely. So let's just chuck this out to throw this out to the panelists. First jobs, are we in agreement with Tyler that you actually need to get out there as early as you can to learn a work ethic which will actually carry you through?
Well, yes, if you can. I mean, where I grew up, you could work from the age of 12, but the only work was pretty back-breaking agricultural work. So we all went off tatty picking, picking potatoes.
Wow. Okay.
In the season.
Did you know harm? How about you, Simon?
I think my first job, actually, I'm afraid I was a student by the time I did it, which is probably a very late starter, isn't it? But I was a waiter in a cafe in the south of France, and improved my French no end, apart from the fact I had this very strong southern accent. And yeah, it's just amazing. You're responding to people, you're working as a team, you're doing all the things that adolescents are typically not very good at. So it did me the world of good. Definitely.
How many plates can you carry?
Well, 3, but not very well as well, I have to say. And it might not get to the right table as well. That's the other thing.
But that's the thing, Tyler. I mean, the transferable skills means that Simon can clear a table really well. It is that thing that sets you up to do things, doesn't it?
It is, absolutely, and I know we laugh at it, and of course there's so much conversation about, yes, what jobs are going to completely go out the window in a world of AI, who is going to be displaced. But I'm putting my money on those things which demand nimble hands. If you can do 3 plates, fantastic. 4 plates, even better. And I think this notion of, we talk about human interaction, being able to resolve conflict because someone's order is wrong, whatever it is. These are proper life skills, and whether this moves into the world of what will still be negotiation, whether that is in across a boardroom table, whether it is conflict resolution in an encampment in the back of some nation. All of these things are going to be important, and I do believe those skills, whether it is working in an aircraft as a flight attendant, whether it is frontline at a hotel, being in a cafe, I think that more and more, I think these are the type of also skills we're looking for in the world of journalism, which sounds surprising. Of course, people should be able to Of course, be good writers and understand the nature of research. But I think also you have to be, not every day, but actually the skill of being a good host is also important.
What I find quite fun at the moment is the way that London is operating in terms of entrepreneurship. That teenagers don't go to shops anymore teenage boys don't go to shops anymore to buy their clothes. What they do is there is a thing that happens on social media. You can tell I'm a parent. I've no idea what's going on. But what they do is they go to so-called things called drops, and companies, guerrilla clothing brands that are just starting up, let the kids know where there is a place, and up to 2,000 teenagers go in order to pick up fresh clothes that are thrown out of the back of, they literally chuck it out of the back of the van. And what's happening now, Tyler, is that young people are sort of totally bypassing the traditional way of being an entrepreneur, and they're getting on with it themselves. And I find that incredibly impressive, a bit odd and a bit strange and a bit wild. But there's that sense, isn't there, that actually if you can just get on with it yourself, then you can have a very, very good time of it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that we do, perhaps put a little bit too much emphasis on the power of a piece of paper and many tens of thousands of dollars, francs, pounds thrown at this piece of paper per year. And oftentimes, within all of that as well is that sense of, dare you take the risk? And of course, it doesn't always turn out to be a world of reward, but oftentimes it can. And I think that is, some of the most interesting people I know, didn't get a piece of paper. They just, went out there and did it. And I think we have to, listen, I can't, I'm not a parent, but, maybe from time to time it is okay to say go for it. But I do feel I do have many, many children in my employment.
Indeed, and you have grown up at some stage, so you have had to go through the thing of it. Let's move to let's talk about aeroplanes for a bit. Etihad has got a long-range single-aisle aircraft. It's beautiful. You've been on it. How is it?
Well, no, listen, we did a story about Etihad. Listen, Etihad is not the only airline that has bought the A321LR. This is Airbus. Most of us are flying around in narrow-body Airbuses commercially all over the world every day. And many will know that obviously Airbus have stretched the range of this aircraft, and what you have now, and they're going back and forth across the Atlantic. They've now done an XLR version, which goes even further. But there is something about going long haul and not being in a double-aisled aircraft or a double-decker aircraft, where you're still crossing continents and oceans in an aircraft which is, you could just say much, much cozier. Etihad are quite interesting. So flag carrier of Abu Dhabi and flag carrier of the UAE. They have now they're using this aircraft to, of course, open up routes and open up frequencies as well. And you can say that probably Etihad is if you look at their new routes, Emma, they're going after Luxembourg, of course, Geneva, opening up even Charlotte, North Carolina. That probably will not be on that aircraft. It'll be on a longer range aircraft. Taipei. So if you add up all of those markets, Zurich now triple daily. They're the only carrier from the Gulf that is flying triple daily. Who are they after? They're after family offices. They want family offices to partly relocate or fully relocate to this region. So they are going after all of those markets, Luxembourg, Geneva, Zurich in particular, where they can make, of course, the back and forth between these points much easier, much more frequently, and much more frequent, I should say. And if you get a chance, Emma, if you have to connect through Abu Dhabi to head to somewhere in Southeast Asia, I can highly recommend the service. Though actually they're not doing it out of London right now, because London, they're putting a big beast like an A380 on that route at the moment.
When it comes to the sense of occasion, though, how does that change things?
I guess part of it is that sense of coziness, intimacy. Everything feels a little bit. Well, of course, everything is much closer because it's a 1-1 configuration at the front of the aircraft. It's a traditional 3-3 configuration in economy. And I guess I think what's actually very interesting about the region right now, of course, we used to celebrate Singapore Airlines once upon a time, Malaysian, Cathay Pacific still doing a very good job. But you really get the sense that the carriers in this region, they feel like the Southeast Asian carriers did 25 years ago, that level of service and that sense of the international as well. It was amazing. The woman who was looking after, my stretch of the cabin yesterday, Rita, she was from Guadalajara, thrilled to be working out in this part of the world, a bit disappointed that Etihad doesn't fly to Mexico City yet. And I think that's also one of the great things. It's, to be able to also be in this part of the world, have these conversations with people, of course, who, again, I come back to that point of looking for opportunity as well, and also, a sense of being part of a global community.
Let's look ahead to what's coming up with what you're doing in Abu Dhabi, but also some of the things that Monocle's up to in the next few weeks.
Well, aside for looking for future shopping malls, and my next life as a shopping center developer, Emma. I can't fully disclose why there's a sizable delegation of Monocle and Wink Creative Crew in Abu Dhabi. What we can talk about in the Gulf, though, is in 2 months' time, the start of May, we will be up in Bahrain for the first edition of the Chiefs Conference. That's our leadership conference, bringing together CEOs, chief flight attendants, chiefs of police, anyone who's a chief, getting them up on stage, hopefully in the audience. And this is all about, again, how to lead a future generation of employees, how to rebrand your business, etc. That'll be taking place in Bahrain at the start of May. But just the week before, that's going to be a bit of a road show. We're also doing the first edition of the entrepreneurs, which we've never taken into a conference format. Isabel, you would like this. We are heading to, and it makes sense from an entrepreneurial point of view, we're heading to Shanghai. Once upon a time, about 7 years ago, we were in Chengdu, where we did such a conference that was more urban focused, but now we head to Shanghai, first venture back into China in a very long time. So we'll see how that goes.
Isabel, do you have any advice for Tyler?
Well, I think, Tyler, you'll find the mood is pretty positive. I was in Shanghai in December, and I think all the wolf warrior stuff is very out of style. Everybody's friendly towards foreigners and looking forward to more business. So I hope it goes very well.
Good news.
Yeah, and I think that is the mood. I think that is why we're going. We know, of course, China has its complications, as well, I think as to many parts of the world at the moment. But I think when you think about innovation, and again, I think also that sense of actually maybe a settling down, as you said, Isabel, of a more welcoming view. I think the feeling is that Shanghai feels pretty perky and buoyant. So anyway, up first, dear listeners, join us in Shanghai. And that's the amazing thing, Emma. Already, the first day that I think Andrew announced it, and we thought, okay, this is going to be people maybe from Beijing, maybe people from, from the likes of Guangzhou buying tickets. But no, right away, Americans, Germans, buying tickets to go to Shanghai.
Incredible stuff. Tyler Brûlé on the line from Abu Dhabi. Thank you so much for sparing a good 20 minutes of your time today. You're listening to Monocle on Sunday with me, Emma Nelson. Simon Brooke and Isabel Hilton are in the room. Isabel, let's develop a little bit more of that idea of Americans and Germans buying tickets to travel all the way to Shanghai. It is a sign, isn't it, that we're going to talk about tariffs in a minute and the geopolitics, but the fact remains is that people still need to do business, want to do business, and will actually not necessarily bypass the difficulties, but will accept that the difficulties are part of it, but not be stopped.
Well, that's right. And I think actually if you look at what's happened to the global economy in this second Trump era, you might have thought that, trade had fallen off a cliff, but it hasn't. It's just relocated. People are manoeuvring around the kind of, the uncertainty that he has introduced into the global trading system. And if you look at China trade, actually it's dipped a little bit in the United States in terms of exports, but not very much. And it has really boomed in other economies. So you're absolutely right. Business goes on, and all economies are actually rather desperate to keep stimulating, to keep selling. And that's what we see. That's what the activity is.
Indeed. I mean, just looking at the way that the papers are covering the US-China trade, well, they're calling it trade war. But you have this idea. I'm just looking at Bloomberg now, and it says, soy hits almost 3-month high on optimism over US-China trade. The whole thing, there are problems such as China. I think there's a problem with the Panama Canal, isn't it? The ports contract has been cancelled.
The Hutchinson port, I mean, there are serious problems that Donald Trump keeps throwing hand grenades into international relations, but at the same time, he's planning to go to China, and that was just confirmed for the last day of March. I think March 31st he's going, so he'll be there in April. They will throw a big party for him. He will proclaim Xi Jinping to be his closest friend and golf buddy, and despite there being ostensibly a trade war, the Chinese have pretty much put him on notice in Busan last year when he was threatening, massive tariffs against China. And they very quietly said they produced new regulations for the export of rare earths and strategic minerals, which would have brought, a lot of American industry to a grinding halt, as well as the rest of the world. And so Trump had to back off. It was a taco moment. And so now a lot of this is show. He's going to have to sell the idea that the Chinese are going to buy loads of American soy instead of Brazilian soy. But, he's been pretty much outmaneuvered by China in his kind of rectification campaign. So now we're going to have a lot of talk and a lot of display and a lot of claims of victory. But I think that we, certainly in terms of China, we're not going to see those massive tariffs again.
China can sit and wait it out, can't it? Simon, let's just talk about these tariffs again. They just come round, don't they?
They do rather,
like
yeah.
A very difficult bus. They have that idea now that we had the Supreme Court in the United States smacking down Donald Trump on Friday, saying that he had overreached. It wasn't the tariffs themselves that were illegal. It was a manner in which he had decided to take executive control. But we then had him come back yesterday saying that the 10% tariffs that the Supreme Court had suggested were the way to go was now going to become 15%. So there is this, Isabel talking about, we still do trade, we can still do this, we can still do that. Nonetheless, this is something that Donald Trump is not going to let go of easily.
No, it's he's always talked about this. This is something that he's passionately believed his whole life. I mean, talking to businesses as I do, it's interesting. The optimists say, and I think to your point, Isabel, business will find a way. We'll find a way. We'll be pragmatic. We'll find a way around this. But what businesses don't like, investors don't like, and I think this is what we're seeing more of as a result of this Supreme Court ruling, is uncertainty. And in fact, some of the businesses I've been talking to have been saying, actually, this is bad news because at least we thought we knew where we were. And now suddenly we're not sure what's going to happen. I mean, this is a huge amount of money that needs to $130 billion that's been collected in these tariffs. So where's it going to go? Who's it going to be paid back to and how quickly? So it is that sense of uncertainty and also the fact that we are going to see this debate, this argument, this fight between Trump and the courts continue. He is not going to back down on this. He's going to continually make decisions, create policy, set tariffs on the spur of the moment, and businesses are running around desperately trying to work out what's going to happen there. I think the other thing we have to bear in mind is in the longer term, this is going to have an effect on the price of goods in the stores, on the internet, wherever people buy them. And as we know, what really does for politicians is not whatever you think about Trump's constitutional shenanigans or, his foreign policy adventures. What will really decide his fate and that of his party in the midterms and then the next presidential election will be the cost of goods. And if this does have a detrimental effect, it's going to be very serious for him.
Perhaps the broader view on this one is that while we are dealing with the 10%, 15%, this, that, the other, that there are new that some people are suggesting that the Western way of looking at things, it's with the way that Trump has behaved, has prompted a wider overhaul to the way that the West goes about things, and we now have the rise of the global South. We have China clearly, as you say, sitting patiently and riding it through, and then forming new ties with the likes of Canada, and this sense that while Donald Trump is lobbing hand grenades left, right and centre, new networks are being formed and new relationships are being created.
No, he's stimulating everyone. Because, when something as powerful as the United States goes rogue, defensive measures are necessary. It's like Carney's speech on, urging
Rupture.
middle powers. Well, rupture, yes, but saying, okay, so let's not pretend that things are going to go back to, the way they were. So middle powers, let's group. If we're entering a world where very big powers are going to start bullying, all the mechanisms that we've had to limit the capacity of big powers to bully small states, become pretty moot. So what are we going to do about it? And actually, you've seen Carney really begin to execute that strategy quite effectively.
Does that include China, though? Because, China, one of the great powers on earth, and many would say a terrible, terrible bully
Absolutely.
of a nation. So, but this doesn't seem to have affected China's stance, does it? Everybody's just looked at Trump and said, this is not how you do it. Well, the Chinese have kind of said, well, we're rising above all this, but we're going to carry on doing what we do.
China certainly, is better. All you have to do is sit back and let the United States make a fool of itself in order to look good, and that's to the benefit of China. But there was an interesting little side deal done this week between Brazil and India on strategic minerals and rare earths. And, again, Brazil, close ally of China, India, not so much, although, geography dictates a relationship. But they're also finding side deals in order not to be too dependent on China. So there's been a lot of talk about, the United States driving everyone into the arms of China up to a point. Canada, yes, they restored relations, but, they're also canny players. There's a balancing going on. It's not, no one will form the kind of relationship with China as Western liberal democracies had with the United States. On the tariffs, though, this kind of departure from reality is just, it's mind-blowing. Simon, you mentioned the $130 billion, which is effectively an extractive tax on American business. Trump has extracted $130 billion from American businesses. He talks as though foreign countries are paying this. They're not. Americans are paying this. And now they're getting, well, hang on, where's our money? This was an illegal extraction. And I think we'll see, they're not going to give up on wanting their money back because it's serious money.
I think there's one governor of a state has actually decided to mount legal challenges to saying, actually, I want my money back. I mean, how has this tax happened? How has it managed to take money out of the pockets of Americans?
On the levies. I mean, That's what they are. These are the tariffs are an import tax paid by the importer substantially. You might get the exporter absorbing some of it, but they're actually delivered to the exchequer by the importer. And it turns out illegally. Now, he's got a mechanism where he thinks he can reimpose tariffs for 180 days, but then we're coming up against the midterms. And so we're going to have, the price effect that Simon talked about, and we're going to have a public debate on tariffs because they will have expired and he'll be looking for new ways to impose them. And tariffs aren't popular with the US electorate. So he's got a political problem there.
He also has a political problem in Gavin Newsom. I know at the beginning of the programme, Simon, you mentioned Gavin Newsom. So Gavin Newsom, governor of California, incredibly powerful and, dare I say, very charismatic person. And the minute that he arrived in California as governor, everybody thought, he's the next great Democrat presidential hopeful. But there has been so much talk about how the Democrats can bring themselves together to mount a cohesive, coherent, and indeed successful campaign against the Republicans at the next election. And just talking to America experts, they've been saying, don't rush to try and find a replacement. Don't rush to find the next Barack Obama who will sweep in, because there is still time and the Democrats will still find someone. But already, is Gavin Newsom that person?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's interesting on the timing thing. Obviously, they have to take time, as you say, to find the right person. But the problem for the Democrats is that under the American system, you don't have what is effectively a leader of the opposition, do you? You don't have somebody who can speak for the Democrats. Obviously, we've got Chuck Schumer, and he's doing an okay job, but there's nobody who really has the sort of stature of the president who can do this. Yeah, so Katie Balls, as I mentioned earlier in the Sunday Times, has this analysis of Gavin Newsom's chances. Gavin News Scum, as Trump calls him rather wittily. So Newsom is tall.
Badge of honour, some might consider.
Insulted, absolutely. He's been on the world stage recently, attending the Munich Security Conference and at Davos as well. How do we know he's thinking of running? Well, he's got a podcast out. That's a sure sign. And he has a new book to be published shortly. He polls well amongst some key voters across the US. The only problem is, I would say, is that he comes from California, and a lot of people in the flyover states, as they're dismissively described, do not like California. I mean, obviously there have been some presidents, Richard Nixon for one, but it is quite, and Ronald Reagan for another, but that was a long time ago. And I think the gap between California and the rest of the US has grown. And we saw in the last few presidential elections, how the Democrats have piled up votes in California, but not in those key flyover states, as I say. And so I think he also has the problem of living this sort of glamorous, gilded life. He knows the Gettys. He went on holiday with them. So I can see why he certainly appeals to a lot of people, and I think he'll be surrounded by Hollywood glitterati over the next few months and years as he gets his campaign off the ground. But I just think what the Democrats really need is an ordinary guy. Sorry, but we're still in that state, I think, of sexism. Perhaps in the US it would poll better, I'm afraid. From the Midwest, who goes to a diner, who drinks beer, who doesn't drink, Frascati in California.
Now, I wonder about that, because one of the great attractions of Donald Trump is the glamorous family institution, which seems to have been, it fascinates. And also, if we look at the great presidential sort of periods, I immediately think of Camelot and the Kennedys. That idea of having a very glamorous, gorgeous family at the helm might be something exactly what the Americans need right now, but not with Donald Trump as the face of it. What do you think, Isabel?
Well, the ones you cite are East Coast glamour, and I do think there's a California problem. And Kamala Harris had it. That's why she picked a Veep from the flyover states to counterbalance, because you can't have two Californians on the ticket. But actually, I think the Democrats' issue is a different one, or at least it was last time, and because of the timing of Biden finally stepping down. They didn't have a convention. They didn't have, there's no leader of the opposition, but there's a whole process of contestation and exposure through the convention where, the Democrats pick their candidate.
And test them as well, don't
absolutely.
they?
And we missed that last time. So they were suddenly, whoa, and it was Kamala Harris, and who is she? And she's black and she's a woman. And there's Donald Trump, who the working class millionaire. And he does pull off this extraordinary trick of squandering inherited wealth all over the place at the same time presenting himself as a working class Joe. Not many people can replicate that.
No, they can't. Nor do we want them to. Right, it's 9:33 here in London. Let's head to Vienna. We haven't been to Vienna for a while on Monocle on Sunday. So to help us find out what's happening in the Austrian capital, here's Alexei Korolyov. Chris Scott, Alexei, how are you doing?
I'm good. Good morning, Emma.
How is Vienna looking? Just paint us a picture of how Vienna's been for the last couple of months. Post-Christmas makes everything tingle, and then it sort of settles back in again. But has Vienna been behaving itself?
Yes, it has. But it's been incredibly gloomy. But, I don't need to tell you that. London, I think, has been gloomy as well. But it's been a very long winter. I'm very much looking forward to spring.
I think we all are. There is, however, that sense that when you are in Vienna, if it is gloomy, there are nice places to go and sit. Have you availed yourself of that luxury?
Absolutely, I have, yes. Vienna is really good at that. That's true.
Where have you been? Where are the good cafes nowadays?
Well, it's all the classics, all the classic coffee houses. You can go to any one of them and have yourself a very good time with just a cup of coffee while away the day.
And the glass of water and a tray. And do they still do papers with on sticks?
They do, yeah. The papers on sticks is one of my favourite things.
Papers on sticks is the best thing in the world. Isabel Hilton, joining us, is nodding vigorously at the idea of a paper on a stick.
Absolutely.
The standard, wonderful.
It's one of my favourite things. Actually, there's still some hotels where you can have breakfast and get a paper on a stick.
Where, in Vienna or anywhere in this world? Now, just share these glorious pockets of bliss.
In Vienna, I was trying to think where I last. It was somewhere in Europe, and honestly, I can't remember now. But it was a real kind of, oh yes, I mean, it used to be. They used to be everywhere, and they had a special rack where they would hang up, kind of where the sticks went in the holes either side. It was
indeed. Are you a fan of a paper on a stick, Simon? If you say no, then we will have to eject.
To throw you out. Yeah.
I'm generally not just doing this for peer pressure, but I know generally I think there's something about holding up a paper on a stick as well that allows you to read it in a rather imperious way down your nose somehow, doesn't it? I think cross your legs, as you say, wonderful. Relaxed coffee and water and stuff, and peer at the paper on a stick. And actually, I love good old-fashioned newspapers. I'm going to be buying one later today, but what I think I need is a stick to hold it at home so I can read it properly.
Is there a knack to doing the paper on the stick, Alex? We're not going to talk about your subjects for a while, but we're on our way, because this is an important thing we need to sort out. How does one do a paper on a stick? Because it sort of flies around a little bit when I get hold of it.
True.
I'm not very tall, and so I sometimes
business.
feel as if I'm trying to fly a regional printed flag.
That's true. That's true. I mean, it is tricky business. It's true. There is an art to it, and I can't really say I've mastered it, but it's a balancing act. But also, if you're tucked away in a corner as well. I mean, one of the things it's really good at is you can sort of obscure yourself away in a corner because it acts as this sort of wall. If you sort of fold it out completely. And then you've got this wall in front of you, and you don't even have to read it. You can just sit behind it.
Just be private.
Brilliant. You can just be private. I'll be joining you in the Café Central later on today for a verlängerter and a bit of sulking. Okay, Alexei, what's happening in the news?
Well, to connect to that actually. So this, coffee house world and so on. That's the old world. That's the old Vienna that we all know and love. So one of the things I thought I'd talk about is I did this story, and I thought I'd include this partly by way of shameless self-promotion. So this is a story about Austrian monarchism. It's a radio story I did, and it's coming out this coming week. But also I thought, because, it suddenly felt very relevant given what's happened to the British royal family this week and to a certain former prince. So I visited this strange world of Austrian monarchism. I spoke to a number of people there, because the Austrian royal family, the Habsburgs, who created the Vienna that we know, all the coffee houses, all the museums, lots of things that you see, around you in Vienna. That's all due to the Habsburgs, who, either did it personally or it happened during their time in power. And they are still around, the family. And then there are these groups of people who very much would like to see them back. And I spoke to one of them, and it was very interesting everybody I spoke to for that program, they all made comparisons between the British royal family and the Habsburgs. And the point was that, of course, you can say many things about the Habsburgs. They did start the First World War, but they are still widely regarded as having sort of principles and moral fibre, and that's the thing that that is still appealing to people, and that was very interesting to hear. And then another thing that they said, which again seemed sort of strangely interesting, was that the whole shtick is that we are obviously we're not expecting the empire to come back anytime soon, but look at the state of the world right now. Look at the state of Europe, and compare and contrast to how it was under the Habsburgs. At least this central bit of Europe. There were no wars. Things were relatively peaceful. Art and culture were blooming. And wouldn't it be nice to have something like that back here in Europe? So they're sort of using that as a model for an ideal EU. And I thought, it is strange, this whole world of monarchism in this day and age in Austria. But then again, there is something to that argument.
And it's very interesting when you speak about the idea of the resurgence of monarchism, when we're going to be talking in a little moment about what happened on Thursday here in the United Kingdom when the King's brother was arrested. And there has been so much of a sort of a championing, actually, of the British monarchy by saying that Andrew was excommunicated, he was pushed out of the family, and as a result, the monarchy will survive. And that doesn't seem to be wildly questioned here in the United Kingdom. It's quite a strange state of affairs that people still celebrate and trust the institution. In Austria, is there any sense that this play to bring back some sort of monarchism in whatever form is actually something that people would go for?
Well, no, I mean, there are organizations that, are seriously campaigning for this. But of course, this is a minority. And, nobody is really expecting that to happen. People are realistic about this. But then, what I said before, there is this moral argument that they make. Wouldn't it be nice to have a benevolent Kaiser once more, who just sort of rules over things and let things...
Starts wars.
Yeah, and starts wars, ultimately, yes.
Isabel, what are your thoughts on this one? Because I know that your face is there's a sort of a half nod.
I think it's a reflection of another widespread phenomenon, is that we're all rather fed up with our politicians, and I think the pace of politics, or the pace of expectations, which doesn't really allow politicians to deliver anything before their ratings crash. And we've seen this cycle repeated in the UK, but not just in the UK. We see it elsewhere, and there is a very low in Western democracies at the moment. We really don't trust our elected politicians. And I think that this phenomenon of kind of, the golden era of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the benevolent leader, that's a kind of recurrent, let's believe in something, and they dress up and they look great and we love the horses.
Bring back the uniforms.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there's certainly, that's certainly a big part of of Britain. I think, though, the Andrew affair is going to affect the monarchy. I do hear people say this is a real test for the monarchy. And I think that the British monarchy under the late Queen pretty much kept itself going with all its palaces and all its flummery and all its Victorian splendour. But we're entering it feels a little bit more kind of toned down, certainly with the next generation. They can't go on these, tours of the Commonwealth anymore and expect it all to go well. I mean, they tried it and it didn't go well. These carriage processions through former imperial capitals don't play anymore. So I think they're going to have to become just a little bit more Scandinavian. Maybe, sell a palace or two, because they have an awful lot of them and, they cost a lot to maintain. There is now some question because so much of what drove Andrew and Sarah Ferguson was about trying to find meaning and money. So the budgets are going to be examined a little more closely. Why should the Crown Estate charge wind farms for their connection to the near shore? There are all sorts of ways that the royal family makes money that we don't really get a look at.
And Simon, this disillusion with the political sphere, I think it might be accurate to say that actually you give advice to politicians about how to communicate. I mean, I don't know, is that a gut punch, or is that just something that politicians do really need to get sorted?
They do. I think, as you say, Isabel, there is this gulf between the electorate and politicians. And when I help politicians with their communications, I'm trying to bridge that gap and say, look, you need to speak the way normal people do to connect with ordinary people. And the problem is, of course, that we have sort of generations of politicians who have worked in think tanks, they've been a researcher for a politician, they've been on the lobbying circuit, then they get elected. They really don't know anything outside politics. And we had a great thing a few years ago where people were saying, it's wonderful, this 23-year-old has been elected to the House of Commons or whichever legislature. No, at 23 you should be out doing your thing, and then 10 years later, okay, you've got some experience, then you can come back to it. But I do think the monarchy thing, I think, is really interesting because, of course, there's this debate, isn't there, about Iran, whether Reza Pahlavi should come back. I mean, he's pushing it. It doesn't look terribly likely, but he does have support there, which is interesting. And then if you look at Spain, for instance, this is a history lesson, but obviously with the fall of Franco, the fascist dictator, Juan Carlos came back and introduced democracy.
And he was a pivotal figure, actually.
Absolutely.
He saved Spain from a military coup. He played a really important role.
And only a monarch, I think, could do that. If he was
Absolutely.
another politician, it would have been a lot more difficult. So, yeah, it does sound ridiculous. It does sound Ruritanian, sort of some historical quirk or whatever. But actually, I don't know. I think perhaps monarchy might have a renaissance.
Alexei, the Habsburgs have got a pretty sort of difficult job here because Simon was, first talking about how those who communicate with the general public need to sound like a normal person. But if you are called Archduke Edward, that's going to set you apart for starters, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, the thing about the Habsburgs and all those people, they do know how to speak. They're really good at public speech. And Karl Habsburg, the current head of the family, he's really good at public speaking. And he does this lecture every year on his birthday in the middle of January or something, where he talks about the future of Europe. It's like 2 hours long or something. But it is quite fascinating to listen to because, you don't hear this sort of language anymore. And he speaks in English as well. So he does that in English. You don't hear this sort of language anymore. But of course, there is this problem. I mean, in fact, one of the people I tried to speak to for this monarchist piece, again, another bit of self-promotion there, was a real count. And that was the first thing he said on the phone when I called him. He said, "The Count is speaking," and this was an invitation for me to I don't know what, but this was really weird. That was a weird moment.
I imagine. Did you doff your cap?
If I'd had one, then I would have. Yeah.
A gentle bit of instinctive genuflecting never hurt anybody. Right. Okay. Let's all bow. Right. Talk about other things that are happening in Vienna.
Another thing that is happening in Vienna that I'm very much looking forward to is the Museum of Applied Arts, one of my favorite museums in Vienna, again, founded by the Habsburgs, known as you know, Emma, very well, as MAC. It's reopening its very celebrated permanent exhibition about Vienna at the turn of the 20th century, so the golden age of Vienna and Viennese art and culture and so on, the age of Klimt and Schiele. It's called Vienna 1900, they've been sort of reworking things behind the scenes, and it's a new sort of concept. I mean, I haven't seen it yet because it's only opening this Tuesday, but it's going to be presented. So it's over 700 objects from the era, from the era of the Sezession and the Wiener Werkstätte, all the sort of applied design. Lots of pottery, lots of furniture, and so on, all presented in a way where it's all put in a context. So there are rooms full of these objects, filled with these objects, put in a certain way to create a certain atmosphere. So that's the new concept behind it, and I'm very much looking forward to that because it is one of my favorite museums in Vienna, and that has always been this exhibition, permanent exhibition, has always been one of my favorite things to see and places to go.
And indeed, it is one of those incredibly exciting periods where you get architecture, painting, music, art, literature, all mixing up together, often in the coffee houses.
Absolutely, that's absolutely right. Yes.
Let's leave it there. So do carry on, Alexei. Let's not leave it there. Keep going.
No, indeed. I mean, this is one of the things. Again, that was one of those things. One of the things that the monarchists mentioned to me, that it was only thanks to the Habsburgs that this was possible. That Vienna was at the center of at the beating heart of Europe at the time, which is partly true. I don't know whether it's ever going to happen again, that, Vienna once again becomes the center of art and culture and architecture and so on. But it is certainly, it feels very special to be here and to live here and to experience this on a daily basis, see all these buildings all around me all the time. And again, as I said, I'm very much looking forward to visiting this exhibition, and I'm going to leave it there.
Thank you so much. Off to the cafe you go. Alexei Korolyov in Vienna, thank you so much for joining us on Monocle on Sunday. Isabel, Hilton and Simon Brooke are sitting here with me in London. Simon, what have you spotted?
New York Times is looking at the situation in Iran, and there's a profile of Ali Larijani, who is Iran's top national security official, a veteran politician, the New York Times reminds us, former commander in the Revolutionary Guard Corps and current head of the Supreme National Security Council, which, just to say that in Iranian context, sort of makes me shiver. And the paper points out he was actually responsible for crushing the recent protests. And the paper points out, or reports anyway, that he's been effectively running the country and has sidelined the current president. He's also devising plans for managing the country. I think this is very important. During a war with the United States, Iranian officials in the piece are very bullish about their prospects. But the paper also reports that in the event of this war, should it happen, special forces units of the police, intelligence agents and others are going to be deployed to the streets of the major cities, presumably to crush any kind of opposition. And the paper also reports that the Iranian leadership is preparing not just for military and security mobilization, but also for its own political survival. So, obviously a fascinating character, somebody we're going to hear a lot more of, but as I say, it does make me shudder given what his plans may well be for crushing protests. There is,
and we have had student protests in Tehran this morning and yesterday, which I found quite astonishing to read about, given the thousands of people who were killed last month. But just looking at the way that the Iran-US conversations are going, the negotiations in Geneva going well, and the mood from Iran saying we are ready to do deals, we are ready to have agreements. Nonetheless, when you do have, I think there was discussion yesterday that most people involved in it believe that this is going to end in some sort of conflict, that no matter what the mood music is, that there is a sense that something will happen. What are your thoughts on that one, Isabel?
Yes, I think so. But, we have this contradiction of someone who comes to power in the United States promising an end to kind of endless wars and this particular global role that the United States in overthrowing governments and then having to pick up the pieces rather ineffectually. Well, Iran is the mother of all those situations. The idea that you could have regime change in Iran without there being years of consequences, particularly if it was externally brought about. I'm not sure that this administration is really up to it.
Let's talk about other things. What's happening? What have you spotted, Isabel?
Well, it's the fourth anniversary of the beginning of the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and a story that hasn't got a lot of attention is that the Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico and the Hungarian president are threatening to cut off emergency electricity supplies to Ukraine because of the failure of oil supplies which come on a pipeline through Ukraine, both to Slovakia and to Hungary. The reason the oil isn't coming through is that the Russians had a drone strike on their own pipeline, and now these two countries, which are closely aligned with Moscow are threatening Ukraine, which is already undergoing a kind of terrible hardship because of the attacks on energy supplies. So it's just a reminder that this continues, that Russia's influence in Europe is still extremely strong, and no end in sight.
Indeed, the article in Reuters, which talks about this story, it highlights the fact that it is Slovakia and Hungary who are still the only two EU countries that still rely on significant amounts of Russian oil. Yeah. And that made me think, hang on a minute, the full-scale invasion started 4 years ago. How is that still being allowed to happen?
Well, it's incredible the way. I think what's interesting is the good news is I think authorities around the world are now tightening this supply, isn't it? Aren't they? Because previously we saw a lot of it a lot of Russian oil still being shipped around the world on ships with flags of convenience and through Byzantine creations of companies that didn't seem to have any sort of legal entity behind them. But it does seem the world is now finally, authorities around the world are now finally beginning to take action against this shocking trade, because it really has, it's kept Russia going. I mean, the fact that Russia has been still able to sell so much oil and natural gas around the world through proxies and through, as I say, these labyrinthine corporate structures. But finally, it's interesting, over the last few weeks, we've seen various ships in various waters impounded or, with crews arrested, and they are in fact Russian ships, aren't they? So finally it's beginning to happen. But I think, like so much about this conflict, it's in many ways too little too late. This should have happened 4 years or even 3.5 years ago, perhaps. The fact it's happening now has given Russia such a head start.
There was a kind of fundamental infrastructure of pipelines as well, which, and these things, it's a big historical legacy. Sorry, Emma.
No, we just have but 3 minutes left of the programme, and I know you were desperate to talk about curling.
I am, because, I would just like to remind the world that, you owe Scotland a great debt of gratitude for the invention of curling.
Thank you, Scotland.
I spent my young years in a place called Alford in Aberdeenshire, where there was a curling pond, and there is a curling club in Alford, 150 years old. So you guys may just have noticed, but curling's been going for a while in Aberdeenshire.
Are we in the presence of a curler?
Back in those days, I was very young, and I don't think there were many women curlers. I used to go to the skating pond, which was next door. But the difference was that the curling pond was very well maintained, because it's not just a matter of freezing, which in Aberdeenshire isn't a big problem. But if you get snow on top of ice, it freezes to the ice, and then you can't curl. So there was a whole team of people.
Why can you canny curl?
Because you don't have the surface. You need a really smooth surface. So as soon as there was snowfall, people would have to go and sweep the snow off the ice in order that there be this lovely smooth curling surface. And they didn't do that for the skaters. So the reason I'm not an Olympic skater, I blame the curling club.
Indeed. Was it a big part of growing up? You talked about the fact that you didn't do it, but what you're talking about there is an entire community who
absolutely
pulled together.
It's a big thing, and the curling club is still there after 150 years. And they did have to, it's hard work maintaining an outdoor curling pond, and they were very proud of it.
I bet they were. And we're looking forward to, that's just sort of filled my heart with joy. Thank you, Isabel. And we are looking forward to, it's the last day of the Winter Olympics, isn't it? And we have the great ice hockey fight between America and Canada. And lots of people are cheering for Canada today.
Well, of course they are. Yeah, absolutely. I've just got into ice hockey recently. It is really exciting. Oh, God, no. You're joking. I'd have to spend about 10,000 quid on the kit, and by the time I could put it all on, I probably wouldn't be able to move in it. You do have to wear an awful lot of protective gear, but it's just incredibly fast, incredibly exciting. Not as exciting as curling, he said, bringing the conversation back to curling, because I want to know, apparently it started in the 16th century, and even Peter Bruegel painted it. But the thing is, Isabel, where did curling start? How did somebody have the idea of sweeping a sport based on sweeping and mopping? Do you know?
Well, it's a bit like bowls, only on ice. And if you don't have a bowling green, it doesn't. You can still, why not? Curl. Well, because the whole. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the rules of curling and how you score, but essentially, imagine a darts board sort of on ice. So you've got a centre which is marked by a red cone.
Oh yeah.
And the whole game is to get your stone closest to the red cone and to knock your opponent's out. Ooh, so, the reason it's called curling is that these stones curve. You put a little twist on them and they curve. Right. And the sweeping just, helps them curve towards the opponent's stone and push it out of the way. So that's why you sweep.
It's quite strategic then, quite nuanced and quite mean in a way.
Deeply mean, absolutely.
We'll have to leave it there. That brings us to the end of Monocle on Sunday. The warmest of thanks to my guests, Isabel Hilton, Simon Brooke, Alexei Korolyov and Tyler Brûlé. The programme was produced by Desiree Bandley and Mariella Bevan. She was also our studio manager today. I'm Emma Nelson. Monocle on Sunday's back next week. But for now, from me, goodbye. Thanks for listening and enjoy the rest of your weekend.